Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Steps to Soul podcast. Today, myself, Brandon Bourgeois, and my co-host Christopher Sater are going to cover a unique topic probably not often thought about by buyers or sellers. And the title of today's show is Business Owners, How to Handle and Screen Unsolicited Offers and Buyers for Your Business. Now, buyers are up there saying, no, this is a podcast totally for sellers. Not the case, because if you are reaching out to people, how you do it, how you present yourself, and how the sellers have to interpret it, there are a lot of factors that go into that. And unfortunately, in the industry today, Chris, it is exploding in popularity. I was even on a podcast yesterday talking specifically about this, ironically, before our topic. A little different perspective, but again, times are changing, are they not?
Yeah, there's so much information out there and just so much data that a lot of people are, scraping data and getting access to businesses they didn't have access to before. At least you know who the owner is and the phone number. So yeah, you're seeing a lot of activity in the marketplace. I know you even see it with your listings and businesses, right?
Absolutely. We see it all the time. These companies claiming to have marketing connections, is scraping using different AI tools, Apollo, et cetera, and just mass emailing. And it's amazing how much of the data they're scraping is also wrong sometimes, or misinputted, and it doesn't look good, unfortunately. And I'm tiresome of getting those emails, honestly. And I'm sure sellers are too, which is why today's great for both buyers and sellers to listen to this podcast, because it affects both of you if you're going down that route. And if you're a buyer, you need to think of this mindset too. Reach out to a seller, and a seller's going to say, I'm not for sale, but suddenly, your phone rings, or I get this email, or I get a letter from someone. It's like, man, I want to buy your business. Most business owners go, man, that's great. Someone wants to buy my company, right, Chris? That's my dream. Somebody reach out and say, I just want to buy your business. I want it today. Well, unfortunately, as I've seen all too often, they don't want to buy your exact business. They want to buy a business in your typical category, region, or size, which is fine. But just know that the actual words on the paper may not mean exactly what the letter is intending to do, right, Chris? And I think too often owners get sucked in and buyers overgeneralize their approach. And we're going to talk a lot about that today, and kind of the good, the bad, the ugly, and what to watch out for. And look, we're not competing against ourselves telling you how to do it. But at the same time, if you're going to do it right. Because when you mess it up, you stain yourself and you stain the owner, and then you're doing a disservice to everybody in the SMB community. So this is more of a, I guess, public service announcement than anything today. But I promise you'll want to listen further ahead, because we've got some great stuff coming up. Correct, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's we're seeing the increase in unsolicited offers because we've been kind of static as an economy here for a little while. You've got so much capital sitting on the sidelines, and so they're not even waiting for things to come to market. They're reaching directly out to those owners. I talked to an owner earlier this week. I think he was exaggerating a little bit, but he said he gets a call with an offer almost weekly. He's in
that seems a little hot, but I agree with you.
Yeah. I get his point. I don't think he meant to say it that way, but that's the way it came across. Yeah, that he was trying to make a point. We don't need buyers. I need the right buyer. I've got people calling me wanting to buy this company, but I'm calling you, sitting down with you, because I want to make sure we're doing the right valuation. We're going through all the proper steps and the proper channels, and I know that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'd say to all the owners that get unsolicited offers, make sure you know what you're doing. It's not just about the flattery of that call coming in and saying, hey, we'd like to buy your business. I know that can feel probably validating at first, but you kind of got to back up from that conversation and make sure you understand what's about to take place if you go down that road.
You're exactly correct. And you mentioned a bunch of good reasons why unsolicited offers are increasing. You mentioned increased amount of capital. I'd like to throw my ring in the hat there and say, I think it's a generational shift from previous thought processes. For one, you see a lot more younger and sophisticated buyers who grew up in the digital age entering the workforce, whether as doing the outreach for people or themselves doing outreach. And they're more comfortable doing email outreach and doing that kind of unsolicited outreach that we just mentioned previously, scraping, using AI and technology tools to expand their outreach. If you're doing letters and stamps and mail, that takes a lot more time. But if you can scrape with, Apollo, pull these contacts, clean these contact lists up, you can send as many emails as you want. Granted, you pay a little bit of a service fee. We're not here to talk about the email marketing campaigns, how to do the back end work, but there's a lot of great marketers doing that. And if you're like us, you see your inbox, it's blowing up lately with people and how they're finding your information sometimes is almost surprising. And it just continues to grow. And with the ability to scrape public databases, not just, people like Dun and Bradstreet, but being able to people being creative with AI, going onto other public records and scraping it using Google Maps. It's really incredible, but also it's crowding the space with people who are good at that, but they don't really know what they're getting into to buy a business. And often their message is not good. Their presentation is not good. And they haven't really thought out the process. There's been a big wave of be your own business owner that has swept through the country. But if people really sat down these buyers, for sellers, you deal with them and have a real plan in place. And I find that's the biggest disconnect we've seen talked about is a lot of these buyers don't know actually how to get the deal done. They know they want to do something, but they thought out how to find you, but they never really thought through how to finish the process and do it correctly. And that's what we're going to really highlight more now is, hey, so if you get an offer, what type of unsolicited buyer are you going to find and what is it going to be? So let's jump into that a little bit. The types of unsolicited buyers you're going to come across and know who you're dealing with, because that is so important. Each one is different. What they bring to the table is going to be different. And also how you need to handle them is also very different as well, because based on their knowledge, their skill set, and their means. So first off, let's start with the most likely person to reach out to you. That's a strategic buyer, right, Chris? That's somebody in your industry. Maybe it's a competitor, a regional competitor, or someone looking to expand into a different service market or different vertical to add to their platform. You're going to have more sophisticated emails, most likely, or they're represented by a firm like ourselves or another outreach firm. Probably going to be a little more well-rounded message. It's probably going to sound a little more serious, a little more understood of your industry because they probably got institutional knowledge and verbiage, things they want to add in that outreach. But the biggest risk here, and it's the risk for all of them, but I want to highlight here, is confidentiality, right, Chris? If you don't know how to protect yourself, you cannot let an unsolicited strategic buyer walk in your operation unless you know what you're doing, right? You are rolling the dice, and often the house wins, correct?
Yeah, you got buyers coming in there asking questions. And like we said before, you're flattered that they're asking about your business. And they're throwing around numbers at first. It's even more enticing. None of that is backed up on paper. None of that has been vetted. You probably didn't financially qualify them. You're taking them off their word, or maybe you knew of them through a friend or something like that. But yeah, strategic buyers are a little more safe. I'd say what I worry about more is the financial buyers, the guys, we call them cash flow chasers. They're outside their industry, or they don't even have an industry at all. And now they're asking questions about your business, and maybe they can talk the talk. They know the numbers. They know, gross revenue and net.
Maybe a corporate background.
Exactly. They've got the background. But if you don't identify who you're dealing with early, there's no way you can protect yourself or know what you're up against.
Yes.
Brandon, let me ask you this. What type of buyer do you see as causing the most damage when owners don't realize who they're working with?
It is the unfunded or the funded searchers, as we call them, who are industry agnostic, right, Chris? You said it best. They are chasing cash flow. I want $1 million EBITDA company anywhere in the country, B2B, HVAC, and they'll have a list of 500 industries. One, you're not really interested in all those different industries. Two, does your skill set even apply to get financing to acquire something in those industries? And then three, you say you have funding. I've met a lot of searchers who have zero actual committed funds. They may have people who said they would fund them, but they don't actually have funding. And to some of their credit, there are good ones out there, but not that many that I've found, is this is their full-time job. The problem is they're talking to hundreds of owners. You're not the only owner they're talking to. They're talking to probably 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 different people, probably 20 brokers. They've signed probably 300 NDAs. If somebody signed 300 NDAs and not pulled the trigger in the last 6 months, it doesn't mean they're not trying. But let's take a step back here and analyze this, Chris. That buyer is obviously either hyper picky and probably can't ever decide on something, or B, can't psychologically pull the trigger. Because if you looked at 300 businesses, Chris, I would like to think there were 10 to 15 you should have been like, this is what I've got to take a chance on, or at least submit some LOIs, or at least take a very serious deep dive. And if they're writing everything off of that quick, either they're not doing a very good job searching and clicking on everything, which is a waste of time, or B, they can't commit to a certain deal because their expectations are completely unrealistic. And those buyers are flooding the market. And that's the majority of what you're going to see with these unsolicited offers are those kinds of people entering the searcher, especially the unfunded searcher. And for those who don't understand, that is a person who's looking to buy a business, whose main primary goal is to buy a business, may or may not have a current job, and basically has decided, I want to be a business owner no matter what it is. They're often younger or more recent graduates in their mid to early 30s or younger. So if you see that dynamic, there's a lot of things you can do to protect yourself, and we'll cover that a little bit later. But let me ask you this question. I'll let you talk about the tire kickers. Besides the unfunded searcher, that's probably the worst one, right, Chris? The data miners, the guys that just are curious, right? The guys that may just say, if you ever want to sell, I'd be interested in talking to you. What about those guys? I mean, you know my feeling. I'm not going to get into that.
Yeah, you said it best when you said the guy who's looked at 300 businesses and can't decide on one. It's usually because they haven't taken a step back and said, what do I really want to do? What can I really commit to? And maybe they don't know. But you as a business owner are about to enter their world of having to give them information. If you kind of go down this path with them where they're looking at information, especially if you're not under a non-disclosure agreement, it's very dangerous. Yeah, these people have looked at everything from an electrical contractor to a recycling plant. I'm just naming two businesses, but they don't have a topic. They have this idea of, hey, I want to make $500,000 every year, so I'm looking at everything for $500,000 EBITDA and above, and sometimes it's $1 million in the EBITDA. And they haven't even really worked out the math of what this would cost, even if they could qualify for it. Like, we looked at businesses that they're okay with buying a business for $10 million technically, but they've never worked out the debt service monthly and seen what that comes to. And then if they ever got to that point and had to talk to their family about doing that kind of deal, even if they could, you're talking about a whole different conversation. So, the tire kickers are the worst. You got to be careful with them. On our financial qualification form, when a buyer has an inquiry on a business listing of ours, we ask for how much capital they have, how much cash do you have, how much are you comfortable financing, and where is this capital sitting? Where is it currently sitting, and how are you going to get the rest? Are you using SBA financing? I have so many NDAs where they say they have millions of dollars. And then it says, where is this capital sitting? So many of them put investors. Well, you don't have the capital. You have investors. Yeah. And so when somebody comes to your business unsolicited and says they want to buy your business and that they have the capital, if they say they have investors, ask them where they have that capital and ask for proof of that. You have the right to do that.
Committed capital, too. Let's add that word, committed.
Yeah, you have the right to do that as a business owner. If you're about to show them your financials and your tax returns to show what you do, I think you have a right before that happens to ask for, let me see the money that you have. Get a bank statement. Get a tax return of theirs. That's kind of pressing. It might be seen a little early in the process, but you didn't ask for that person to call you. You didn't ask them to walk through your door and start asking about your business.
They're not entitled to a single thing.
Yeah, you should find out who you're working with before you really head down that road, and if you're even going to entertain it.
I agree, and that kind of leads to the biggest mistake, number one, we were going to talk about is, giving them information too early. One, have the NDA, and if you don't have one on file, get one from somebody, talk to a lawyer, or if you're not sure and you're being approached, you can reach out to us, to a group like us, and say, hey, I've got this guy, can you come in and help? Because I don't want him to know something without proper documentation to protect myself. Don't be honest. Don't assume every person who sends you a flyer or an email wants to be your best friend and wants to use your information just to buy your company. There are people out there that do it just to get access to your financials, to do research. We've had stupid buyers ask us with deals under contract, unfortunately, can I review the financials because I want to practice? No, you cannot. That's someone's proprietary information. If you're not going to buy it, why would you want to practice? And I don't mean to be rude to people out there.
Yeah.
But would you let someone look at your tax returns just because? For practice?
Do you get the college students who reach out to you occasionally that want to see if they can look at a deal just to kind of go through it?
I had one this past, maybe it's November, December, very recently. In the state, now about an hour away from here. I'm in Baton Rouge for context, everybody listening. Want to look at a deal. We said, look, why don't you come sit down in the office? Obviously, you're just out of MBA school. You're 21, 22, 23 years old. Like, we'd like to talk about how we're going to I'm just really too busy to do that. You want to look at a $2 to $3 million listing and you don't want to even bother to come sit down take an hour drive and talk to the people representing the seller? You are naive.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You want to find the bumbling idiot to give you everything for free. Like, that is absurd. You're going to make a life-changing decision and you can't take that much time out of your day to have a legit conversation and sit down and just, let's be honest. You want us to bring you, a 22-year-old, to a 60-year-old owner and say, this guy's going to give you $2 to $3 million and can run your company? He's going to laugh at you.
Yeah.
Unless you can show something we should not be expecting. Come on now.
Yeah.
That is
God bless him. I try to be.
I applaud the effort. I do. I'm glad you're
I
being
do.
ambitious, but
I want them
there
to
is a
learn.
fine line there.
That's right. Yeah, I want them to learn. I want them to know everything, but looking at private listings is not the way to do it. And God bless them. I understand it. I got a 20-year-old in college as well right now, and just you're not going to be able to reach out to a broker
You're
and
not
look at
ready.
somebody's tax returns and
You're
just
not
because you
ready.
want to learn. That's not the way to do it. I
No,
want to
and
ask you this though, Brandon.
go ahead.
What's like one of the worst examples you've seen of information being shared too early, and how did it either hurt the seller or hurt the deal? Or what's kind of the repercussions of sharing information way too early in the process?
Well, absolutely. We got a laundry list of those, but we'll try and sum up a couple of things that have happened. Most often the cases, the owner takes the call, entertains it, and then the person shows up at the place of business and starts talking to people, trying to talk to employees, find out what's going on, being nosy. You want to talk about scare your staff away and scare your people? That is number one. Hey, this guy's walking around saying he's going to buy the business. Excuse me? Wait, and Mr. Seller, I thought you weren't going to sell. Who's this guy? Happens way more often than you realize. I think the biggest and the second mistake I see most often is you get flattered, so you start talking a little bit of shop, right? Most owners, if they're doing something well, they want to brag a little bit. They want to say, yeah, I'm doing great. I'm doing this. You don't know what you're telling this person that they're going to use against you at some point down the road that you don't have any control over. You don't know that's going to leverage the deal they're going to offer you. You don't know what's going to be controlled in that manner. And that is not the way you want to start your operation. That is not the way you want to give someone anything. Like, so, hey, look, I'm looking to buy a business. For example, we had a customer about maybe 6 months ago call us. Buyer reached out unsolicited. Hey, I'm looking for companies doing $500 million. Are you doing that in EBITDA? And he goes, well, actually, I'm doing 1.2. Oh, great. Next thing you knew, that buyer showed up at his doorstep. What do you mean you're here? Well, you said you had it. I'm ready to talk. Owner's like, well, I'm busy working right now. I don't have time to do that. Well, I'm serious. And if you don't want to work with me, then I got to move on. It's like that high pressure sales technique is terrible. And there are buyers out there that really want to do something like we've talked about, but just they don't have the skill set to come in, and you don't know who this person is. You're telling this guy you're making a certain amount of EBITDA. You don't know if he's lying on the phone. He could be your competitor fishing for information, having a sales associate call you, which I know that happens too occasionally. Hey, we're looking about buying. Would you want to sell to me? And really, it's a plant from another strategic buyer or other company just trying to get some basic information. Like, I really want an HVAC company. How many technicians do you have on the ground, really? Or how many trucks do you have fully operational? That's my key metric I found doing my search, right, Chris? And really, what is it? They're just planting for information. They're mining data. They're trying to get stuff from you. You shouldn't be giving them without an NDA signed, period, regardless. No proprietary or any information without an NDA. If they're serious, they'll sign it. And if they don't want to sign an NDA and give you proper financial qualification, then show them the door and do not ever entertain a conversation again. That's simple.
For sure. Sure.
That kind of leads to the next mistake we're going to talk about. Treating it like a compliment instead of a process. Anybody can send you a nice woozy email. I've seen I've seen outreachers say, I'm looking to buy a business in your zip code. No, they are not. It's a funny way of making you feel special. It's a trick to open the door to have a conversation. Does that guy really want to buy a business in 70808 and he lives in Los Angeles? No, he does not. He does not want to buy a zip code. I would almost bet my life savings that all those emails that say that, they've sent to every single zip code in every single area that fills them from an Excel spreadsheet they carve data out of. There's nothing unique about that except that they have an input field in their email chain, right, Chris? You've got to, use a bigger thought process there and be aware of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is the owner feels validated when he gets that letter or gets that communication
and I get it.
from a buyer.
It's nice.
They spent decades building their business typically when they're thinking about it, when it even is of interest to them when they get that letter or that phone call or somebody walks through the door. What I would say though is what clouds judgment the most? Emotion. So if you've got these feelings of greed, we could probably create a laundry list of
1A, 1B right there, right? Let's be honest.
Right. But you if you're feeling like you want to sell and so that letter is even slightly entertaining, you're looking at it or you're listening to the person talking to you and you're trying to buy into this because it's what you want. And now your emotions are clouding your judgment. Compliments don't close deals. You got to understand that. The process will close the deal. And if you don't go through the process in the right order, you're going to jeopardize what you're going to get out of the deal. They're going to use that as leverage. These are guys who are doing this obviously professionally. They're this outreach, this letter
that claim to be professionals that have no clue, which is even worse.
Yeah, this letter did not just come to you. It went to thousands of other businesses and they tailored it specifically to you. And if you don't shift mentally from, hey, this is really flattering to this is a transaction and I have to do the proper things to get what I want out of it, if you don't shift your mindset in that, you're going to end up with either not a deal and having given all your information away, or you're going to end up with a bad deal where you get taken advantage of.
You're exactly correct. And that leads to the next two major mistakes we were going to talk about. Letting the buyer set the timeline and taking any offer at face value. And let's kind of combine those two because they're different, but they are the same in that you and I have dealt with this a lot with different groups when representing sellers or even working with buyers. The buyer should set expectations of what a timeline should reasonably look like if they know what they're doing. The problem is too many owners just get excited to get the basic offer the first time, right? Like, hey, look, I'm going to give you an offer for your company. From what you told me, it's great. Puts an LOI in place. How many times have we heard a seller get an LOI from a strategic buyer, another person who's not serious? It's like the top of the line price. And then the games start, right, Chris? The buyers start wasting time. Because I guarantee you, for a lot of them, it's not their only LOI out there. They're doing diligence on multiple deals. So you feel special, like you said, oh man, it's a validating offer. It's a lot of money. I would never thought I could get this much, or that's the top of the market. Prime price. Now all of a sudden, the buyer starts slowing down. Questions are coming in. Renegotiation starts. And if you don't have someone there who understands the structure, you can't, one, you're not able to protect yourself, but two, you cannot take that deal at face value. Good, savvy buyers who intend to save money are going to renegotiate that deal. I can promise you. They're going to find every single mistake. Well, John, that phone call we had when we first talked, you said you did $1.2 million EBITDA. I made the offer based on that, and I'm finding only $800,000 in EBITDA, so I got to renegotiate the offer. How many times, Chris, have you and I seen that stunt pulled where they overset expectations to come in? There's a massive strategic buyer in the state that does HVAC. How many times has that same buyer rep called all our different offices, claimed to make a full price offer, then either changes it or submits an offer, gets an acceptance, and then never calls back, right?
Yeah.
We know exactly who we're talking about, and we blacklisted them because they lie and they're misrepresenting. And as an owner, we had a couple call us in the North Shore area of the state. They got an offer from that group. Full price LOI, that they thought their value of the company was worth. Both parties signed it. And then that strategic buyer who reached out to them unsolicited never even called them back with a signed LOI in place. How shitty is that?
Yeah, a lot of these groups are. Yeah, a lot of these groups are slick, and they've got the financial.
They've done the walk. They know how to kind of open the doors and say the right words, right? They say all the buzzwords that get you excited.
The big number on the paper, right usually in the first paragraphs, get you all excited, and then you got to read the fine print. But the fine print on an LOI doesn't even do it. It's what they're going to do in due diligence, and you've got to find out what their plan is for due diligence. Here's the biggest mistake I've seen. All businesses that I work with run on either cash accounting or some kind of hybrid accounting. Maybe the expenses aren't on accrual, so it's this hybrid formula. This group is going to come in, though, and they're going to say, we have to convert these to all accrual. So we're going to work up this Q of E, or we're going to do this kind of gap-based accounting. And they talk in such high language and high financial language that you kind of like, well, yeah, of course you got to do that because you obviously know what you're doing.
Totally makes sense.
When they do that, they start shifting things around, and all of a sudden, a $200,000 in payment in January that you're fine with in January, you would have reported it in January every year you were in existence for 20 years. But they say, well, that actually belongs in December of last year, so we're going to take that, move it back, and now we're adjusting the X that we're paying you by $200,000. So 200,000 times 4 is $800,000. We're taking off the offer we just made you, just like that, and that wasn't in the LOI, was it? No. So you've got to watch out for these. If you don't understand the process and you don't understand what these groups can do and how they're going to delay, you're going to take up 2-3 months. What do you think you're going to do after you've been working with a group for 3 months and they say they want to renegotiate the deal? You're already tied into them. You're already mentally sold. You're just waiting for the deal to happen. Now they're
imagine running no NDA in place at that time too.
Yeah,
they've talked to your key employees. You have no leverage because now your employees know what's going on, and if you blow it up, it's like, what happened? What's wrong with the company? It is such a good point you just made, and we talk about offer at face value and that language in the LOI. Don't assume that the timelines they gave you they're going to honor. I see that time and time again from big capital groups and other buyers, and there are sometimes timelines get delayed. Natural disasters, documentation production. That's all reasonable. But man, how often have we seen companies know what they're doing, set a timeline that seems reasonable, but seems a little aggressive, but okay, let's get a deal done. Now, like you said, they start stalling. They get that financial accounting redone. They start renegotiating it. Now they're hoping they've dragged you out. They've worn you out. You feel like it's the only way your company can ever get bought because you have all these problems, right, Chris? All these bad issues. So we got to get a lower price. That leads to mistake number 5, assuming the price is what you're going to get, the net proceeds. Be careful if you don't understand the language in that LOI, what your true walkaway is going to be. Too many owners see the price of, let's say it's easy to have, it's $5 million. Well, they didn't tell you that they're going to, in the offer, LOI, there may be some rollover equity where you're not really getting $5 million at close. You're getting maybe 4 because you're keeping 20. And now there's some other stipulations. And all of a sudden, what you thought your walkaway is nothing like it's going to be. Or they're going to add new language in the APA that's going to withhold. Now, all of a sudden, hey, there's an escrow demand. We need you to withhold back 20% escrow because we don't like this. So now your walkaway has shrunk dramatically. What you start off with $5 million is now down to almost $3.5 million. You know, you have got to be careful with that. And I would advise you heavily, if you don't know what you're doing, have the right advisor on your team. And not just a lawyer or a CPA. Have someone who understands deal knowledge and deal structure. Because if you don't catch it early, it's very hard to reset it down the road. Especially if you do find a really good buyer. I'm not saying all unsolicited buyers are bad people, Chris. We're not trying to bash on them. There are some really good ones out there. But you've got to treat it as if you don't know this person and you should be protective. You don't owe them anything. Start on the right foot and be prepared to excel when this process occurs.
Yeah,
So let me ask you this, Chris. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
How often do you see owners shocked when you work out the math of what they're really going to walk away with versus what was advertised in the offer from the top?
They're always shocked. They're always shocked. Let's say that. Yeah. But I think a lot of times they don't realize, man, then you tell them you got to factor your taxes in, and they get mad. Well, I need more. I'm like, you can't get more based on what the business is generating, but this is the results of what your structure has been and why we ask you to come see us 2 to 3 years in advance to prepare for this day to minimize these issues, right? We want to minimize taxes. Who doesn't? We want to maximize return at close and structure the company so that it can be achieved. Right. All that is for naught if you can't achieve it. And I think too many owners, I get it. You see a price like a house. I'm going to get paid, I'm going to walk. But it's not that simple. It's just not. There's so many moving factors, especially if you start getting a buyer who's creative with the working capital language and the AR and AP language, as you and I have dealt and dueled with time and time again. You need to understand that. And sometimes that's the hardest part to calculate because these offers really don't state clearly what it's going to be or that defined that number or way to calculate and peg that number, correct, Chris? So now you think you're getting this number, but then they come back and start renegotiating based on loose language in the LOI, and the deal is nothing like it looked like. And what you thought was going to be X is now Y, and you're just disappointed. Well, guess what? That's that.
Yeah,
so
if you got a business with a lot of working capital, you know, we're talking,
you better be careful.
A couple $100,000 up to a couple million. You've got to be careful with that. If you've got any kind of seasonality to your business, you've got to watch the timeline. You've got to watch the working capital. I'll tell you, the other day I met a guy who owned a couple tire centers here in the area.
Yeah.
His top number that unsolicited offers were coming in at $6.5 million. In a short order in his office, in 30 minutes or less, I sat there and worked out what his real number was. And granted, not all this was the buyer's problem, the offer's problem. But he had some debt. But he knew he had to pay tax on this. But that 6.5 offer was his walkaway was $1.5 million after everything was said and done.
That's a big difference. Wow.
And so, I asked him, I said, do you have a tax strategist that you've worked with? And what do you think he said? Well, he did. But who did he think his tax strategist was?
His CPA.
Exactly. When I asked that question, have you worked with a tax strategist on how you can, either minimize your tax liability or defer? Oh, yeah. I've worked with my CPA for years. And I'm not saying CPAs aren't good at that. Some have a lot of information. Some are, but if you haven't worked with one who can set up trust or charitable contributions or, kind of rolling this thing into other things, if your CPA is not talking about those kind of things, then you haven't worked with a tax strategist. You've worked with a very qualified CPA who files tax returns, and there's plenty of those. They're great at what they do.
And they're needed.
But if you are selling your business, and this is not something your CPA does all day, every day, is to minimize business owners' tax liability when selling their companies, you're working with somebody who does it once in a while. That's not a tax strategist. That's some guy who, he understands some tax rules, and he'll do his very best. But there are so many ways to minimize that tax liability that it's really worth the conversation to do that.
You're right. And we talked about on the podcast last week, some advisors need to stay in their lane. And we talked about, I gave the anecdotal story about the CPA that calculated EBITDA completely grossly wrong. So just because someone tells you the number and you go to this advisor, he may not be qualified to really break your deal structure down, explain what your company is really worth or how good those numbers really are adjusted. That's why you need the right advisor. And that's not a plug to say we're who you should call just because you're into the podcast, but we think we're giving you fair advice there and saying have the right person who understands that, because I've had a lot of CPAs totally blow that part up and not know what they're doing. And it's not a reflection on them. We're not here to bash on CPAs or any other advisor, but understand there are layers of the onion you need to have ready when the time comes, or be prepared to go open if you're not ready now. Know you need to reach out. So that kind of transitions to a great part of the podcast here. Step by step, how should unsolicited offers be handled by owner? We've kind of hit around that point a little bit, but first off, what's the first thing you should do? You say, what would be the first advice if someone calls you today or sends you an email saying, I want to buy your company? What's the first thing you should do? What would you do if it happened to you?
You should hit the pause button. That's step one. Just don't make any decisions. You need to step back and think about it.
Don't get emotional or greedy. We talked about.
Yeah,
right?
This thing came at you. You weren't even expecting it. It wasn't something that was even on your radar. Maybe you wanted it to happen. That's where the emotion comes in. You wanted it to happen. It happened, and now you're like, oh yeah, you're excited.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to hit the pause button. You need to thank them, but you got to slow it down.
Yep.
You got to then move into high-level qualifying questions that I talked about earlier.
Yes.
Put the pressure back on them. Okay, that's great. You want to buy my business. What are your qualifications? How would you even finance this deal? Can you show me proof of that? Before I even enter this conversation, I'd like to see that. Even before you send them an NDA and give them anything of yours.
Yeah, make them show a little skin in the game.
You can come off friendly. You don't have to come off aggressive like I'm kind of being here. I'm being defensive because I hate seeing people get taken advantage of. Which
we see all the time. They come to us afterwards, unfortunately.
Exactly. It's too late at that point. And then finally, force structure early. What are you thinking about here? Is it going to be an all cash transaction? Are you looking for seller financing? You want to flush that out really early. You've got so many buyers out there who think you're going to give them their business and they're going to pay you over time. And they even want you to still work there sometimes. I've heard about all these horror stories,
Buy money. This is no money down. Do the earn out strategy. You're exactly correct. One of my favorite questions, too, I recommend to is, have you even bought a business before?
Great question.
Have you bought one? Yeah. Because if you've bought one, you understand the challenges and tribulations that go into doing a deal, because there always will be some. No deal is just perfect and smooth. There's always hiccups. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just the nature of doing deals, doing due diligence, working through hurdles, working through different scenarios. No two businesses are identical, so there will be a different path to follow. And if someone is good and has bought a business before, that should be a good green flag. Now, the red flag, the counter argument is they know what they're doing. If you don't, you need to make sure someone's advising you so they don't take advantage of the situation, having that institutional knowledge to structure strategically against you. Okay, it doesn't mean they're all going to do that, but you need to at least, like you said, pause, ask questions, and think. And once you've done all this, and maybe they've given you back some feedback, they're qualified or you think they have the qualification, say that's great. So before we have anything further, what's the next step, Chris? I'm going to let you guess.
After NDA?
NDA, correct. Now it's time for an NDA. You've had they've called you, you paused, you thought, you asked some questions. Now it's, hey, let's get that NDA in place and financial qualification. Let's show that proof. Now at least you've got an NDA in place. What you share with them, you have recourse. Now, don't get me wrong, NDAs aren't perfect. There's always little, because remember, if it's public knowledge before, they can use it. It's not covered by an NDA. I'm not a lawyer, but talk to a lawyer about that. That's typically how those things work, and every clause states that in an NDA. But just know the minute you tell them one item before that NDA is signed, you have no recourse. Don't assume a gentleman's agreement, they're going to keep their mouth shut. There are a lot of buyers that won't. And you'd be surprised, too. And a lot of scams today going on, Krista, I think we're just seeing start to percolate to the top of the surface, is buyers realize there's a lot of pushback on these unsolicited ads from brokers and other people. So they're pooling together and getting VAs, virtual assistants, whether AI bots or people in the Philippines, India, wherever, to do these mass email campaigns and just reach out and be diligent, right? That is their full-time job for these buyers. And they get something, and if they say they're an individual private buyer, but really they belong to a group of 4, 5, 6 of them. And then once one guy gets it, what is he going to do, Chris? Yeah. He's going to share it. Right. So you really need that NDA because you don't know who he's going to give this information to. You have no control once you hit that send button on your email. You have zero control what he does if you don't have that NDA in place. and recourse. Understand that.
And be careful what you send them. High-level financials, P&Ls, that's one thing.
Not necessary at that time. Start small. Yeah. Start with the basic intro stuff. Make sure this even deal makes sense for them before you just give them the laundry list of due diligence.
Exactly right. You need an offer in place that's non-binding, got exclusivity, got a deposit, preferably if you can. But you don't need to give them a customer list. You don't need to give them a vendor list. You don't need to give them all your employees' names.
No.
You can tell them titles, positions, how long they've been there. But, I'm not trying to give away the entire process here, but that's hiding information or giving it at the right time. That's not needed till closing or after closing for those several things, unless it's pertinent to the deal.
That's right. And understand that if they provide you an NDA, which some will do, make sure you get interpretation properly on that NDA, because that NDA may be extremely favorable to them. And especially if it's a strategic buyer, you need to do a little extra diligence on that NDA and make sure you're covered. Because once they find out, like you said, those key things you just listed, that's fair game. And I have seen companies poach. That does happen. There's a reason NDAs were invented.
Right. Yeah.
These things happen. We talked about requiring proof of capability. As a seller too, you want to force structure early. And that's where we come in, and that's where you really need our expertise. I'm going to state this unfairly, plug myself again. The structure of the deal is so important. If you don't start on the right foot and how to guide and hold it accountable, the deal will go where the deal goes. It will wander down the road like a dog chasing whatever cat it sees running down the street. You need to have a verified plan and course to run. And if you don't, your deal can go sideways. It can drag out. It can stall. It can do 100 combinations of things that you don't want it to do. Some you might, most you won't, I can promise you. Take structure early and force structure. Say, hey, if you're reaching out to me, I'm glad you got the NDA back to me. I need to know within a month what we're going to do here. Don't be shy. Say, I don't want to waste my time. And if you're a real buyer and this is your primary deal and you know what you're doing, set expectations that are reasonable and ask them what their timelines are too. And if their timelines, we're looking to do something the next year. They're not looking right now. They're just browsing. Or, hey, I am looking to buy business in the next 6 months. Here's my timeline. They answer those questions. You've got something a little more validated, and you should feel better about your prospects. You've got to know that structure early. And like you said earlier in the podcast too, I'm going to revamp and recycle this. What does your deal structure look like? Do you have financing? Do you have investors? Do you have committed capital? And do you have the time to do this deal? If you're a high pressure W-2 and I'm busy 50 hours a week, when are you going to do this deal?
Right. Yeah.
When are you going to find time to do this deal? Because if you've got a family, that person's not going to spend every hour on the weekend ignoring his family to do this. He's got other commitments. Let's be realistic here. If he lives out of area, we didn't even cover this yet. My gosh. If that buyer lives out of area, are you really going to want to relocate to where I live? Have you even looked at house prices? Have you looked at the cost of moving your family? Because God forbid, some people don't want to live in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, who live in Houston, Texas. There's a lot of wives that would tell their husband, we're not moving to Baton Rouge or Shreveport over Houston, Dallas, Miami. There's a lifestyle you want to live. Does that even match what they want to do here? Or, I'm going to run it remotely, right? Chris, my favorite. I'm going to run it remotely from a town 5 hours away. Huh?
Yeah.
This company's never been run remotely. Yes.
How many days has Mr. Business Owner not been at the office to make this business work the way it does? And now somebody's going to buy it, and they want you to sell or finance part of it, and they're going to run it.
And probably promote your next man up, because he can totally handle it when you're not there. Playbook is, we've heard the playbook.
Yeah, don't be scared.
You got to get that figured out quick, because that'll rat out a lot of things you know to ask and handle.
Right. Don't be scared to screen buyers, because I will tell you one thing. No legitimate buyer has ever walked away simply because the owner screened them or asked them a lot of questions about you're not going to scare away the serious buyers. Now, you may scare away the tire kickers. That's what you want to do anyway. You want to vet them until they say, you know what, these are too many questions for me. I'm out of here. At least that's their psychology. It's like, that's why we do what we do. We're asking a lot of questions up front to kind of push back on, are you really interested in this business? Can you afford this business? And we do that for how many times do we do that per deal? 150, 250, 300 times sometimes? Yeah. So
especially the larger the EBITDA, the higher the EBITDA, the more it's going to be too. And I don't think sellers really realize how much information can flood into a broker. And we have automated systems to help manage that process and be more efficient. But man, it can be overwhelming at times for us. That sounds crazy to say, but it's true. If you get 300 NDAs in a week, we got to be able to filter that quickly. And that's where we talked about all things buyers should be presenting the buyer profiles in previous podcasts. To those of you buyers out there, that's how you're going to stand out as a searcher. That could be the difference between Brandon and Chris looking at 300 NDAs and going, these 100 are worthless, these 100 mediocre. Here's the top cream. Let's go through them real quick and quickly sort, because we're doing our best to reach out to all of you. But if I committed 30 minutes to 300 NDAs in a week, that's not pragmatic. You and I, as a buyer, anybody knows that's not how the best way to do business. And it wouldn't do you a service either. Because if you are a good buyer, we might want to have an hour-long conversation. But if I tell you I only got 30 minutes, you're not getting to make your decision. And the same goes to you as a seller. Understand that time and capital commitment to this process as well. When you start, it's going to be a second job. So why open up a second job for yourself or somebody you're not really sure about? Because how often do we see buyers come to us and say, well, sellers, I got a buyer, but he's been trying to get money, but I'm ready to do something, but this and I need that. It's like, you let somebody get into a deal that couldn't afford to do the deal, and now he knows everything. So if we come in and start bringing other buyers, this person who isn't covered by NDA can go out and tell the whole world we're trying to do a deal, and we can't do a damn thing about it. He can sabotage your deal to keep it his deal. I've seen that happen. There are people who just get greedy and make bad decisions. But you hit the nail on the head there. Do your checklist. Screen buyers. And you said the most true statement I've heard in a long time. If they walk away from being asked to be screened, you did yourself a favor, because they were never going to buy anyway.
Yeah.
They're not going to. I've had buyers say, well, I will never fill out a financial form. I don't have to. Then you don't need to know. You'd fill out any financial form to go buy a house, buy any other item, car. Unless you can show the check. I can write the check right now. The dealer takes it, but come on. You got to screen stuff, people. And buyers, if you're afraid of that, you're not ready to enter the market space. And if you are, you need to have stuff prepared. One thing you can do for buyers listening and sellers to ask for, you mentioned it slightly, Chris, earlier, but get that SBA pre-qualification letter, right? It's not a guaranteed golden ticket in. I'll let you talk about that. But give us something, give the seller something that shows you have some validity to your process and to you as an individual to have credibility that you can perform or at least go buy something, correct? Now, not all guarantee letters from the SBA pre-qualify are great, but Chris, I'll let you kind of touch about some of the bad times that's occurred when it's nice to know, but there's a limitation, correct?
Yeah, I mean, a pre-qualification letter is just it's nothing more than a letter from a bank saying, hey, we're working with this buyer, this client. He'd like to buy a business. We've checked out his credit.
A baseline surface look.
We don't know the business yet. We don't know the business or the cash flow yet, but based on his credit, we are willing to work with him. That's about as good as you can get before the bank sees the financials. Yeah, sure. And it's a good start. It is a good start because that buyer understands the steps in the process, understands what order this has to happen. He's got that relationship built. And now the bank needs the financials from the business owner, the seller. And then now they can vet the cash flow, the debt service ratios, all those things that banks are going to do. And they can apply that to his credit and what his obligations, personal obligations are, and say, does this business work? And I saw a great post yesterday on LinkedIn where somebody said, the SBA is actually a wonderful tool.
Best tool in America.
It's the best tool not only because it gives money to buyers, but it also tells you, is this business worth pursuing and financeable? If the SBA says no, that we can't do this deal, you as a buyer should say, well, thank you for saying that, because I guess I didn't run the math correctly and I was about to buy a business I can't even really afford. I appreciate you running this debt service ratio and understanding that after I pay this monthly note, there's not enough cash for me to even pay myself or pay my personal notes that I've already obligated myself to. That's why the SBA is a great tool, is because, you get the cash, but they also stop you from doing stupid things sometimes.
You're right. I was at the Sunbelt meeting last year and talking to one of the groups in Canada, and he said, y'all have the single greatest tool for entrepreneurship in the world with the SBA, with the least amount of capital needed down, so wide open. He says, you have the greatest tool to facilitate the silver tsunami. I would die to have that in Canada. Because, as you know, Chris, conventional financing is a pain in the ass for a regular business, and it normally doesn't happen.
It's impossible almost.
Almost. The SBA is the single greatest tool in this country, and it's going to change an entire generation's life, their lives when they go use it. Like, we've been preaching that. The SBA is the single greatest thing this country is doing right now to help business owners. And I know that's a bold statement. It's true. The doors it opens and allows for people to facilitate, and also for owners to cash out, retire, and put capital into the economy by doing that. It is an amazing tool. But it leads me to another point to bring up. If a buyer tells you, whether they got a pre-qualification letter or not, that the bank will do this deal Before you have an offer or LOI in place, that is not true. Banks will never commit to doing a deal to at least have an offer or an LOI in place that has been brought to them that they can review to give a term sheet. They may say, we'll pre-qualify at the $5 million. That does not mean they will do your deal. So if a buyer's telling you that, hey, the bank will tell me they'll do the deal today, that is not true. I have never met a bank or loan officer in my entire life that said they can guarantee they'll do a deal before having the offer in place and financials. They may say we could like to look at something or we think we could help, but if they guarantee you, that is an absolute lie, or the person telling you is lying. So true statement there. You don't believe me? Call any banker you know right now. I guarantee you'll be validated. And Chris, you made a great point about the SBA maybe turning it down. Maybe it tells you the deal structure isn't good. Maybe there are some things that need to be changed. That's an excellent tool. And you as an owner, it's great if you even get to do some research on your own what the SBA can do, because don't always assume the buyer knows and asks all the right questions either. And the lender has been able to go over every single specific scenario. There are certain deal structure formats the SBA will not allow, and industries they won't serve. So just understand that too. There are still some areas that it won't help. But overall, it's an amazing tool. And we're so lucky to have it. We were very fortunate. So to the next topic, next section to segue in, and this is a shameless plug for all of us here, me and you, Chris. Should you bring in a broker even if you didn't list the business with us? Say you get this person that calls out. We've mentioned you can bring us in at times throughout the podcast, but let us plug a little bit of our own personal value here just for thought. And as a buyer, this applies to you too. If you've never done an acquisition before, and as a seller you haven't, knowing how to structure a deal, I talked about keeping that deal on track, knowing the financing contingencies, knowing good lenders to use, knowing deal structure they'll approve. All of that is so important when you're negotiating your deal, because we said it time and time again on Chris on this podcast. The business has to be transferable, and if you don't have proper deal structure and you have to go back and redo it, often that's when your deal falls apart, right? So if you don't start off on the right foot, on the right journey, you're not going to be able to complete it most likely. And too often do we see that happen. What are we good at, Chris? We know how to value the companies correct, right? We know how to analyze them. We know how to market. We know how to set up the financing. Those are the major issues. And also we have documentation in place and deal structure, LOIs, NDAs, offers that will help you get your deal across. And also, often hidden aspect, we have great referrals to proper accountants and attorneys and advisors besides ourselves that will help you get your deal done, because they are just as important at different stages throughout the deal. And if you don't have that team, you need to assemble it. Shameless plug, sorry.
No, absolutely. It's I met a guy a couple weeks ago. He had offers coming through the door too, and so showed up at his office. Started to get the feeling, why am I even here? Because I didn't feel like he thought he really needed me. I'm not sure why he called me out, because I think he felt like these offers I think he was looking for me to validate his offers in 30 minutes, without seeing any financials.
Just give me a thumbs up. That's all I need to know.
Broker said it was good.
If it was that easy, we all do it.
I got to talking to this guy. I was like, well, how'd they come up with the value? And he had no idea how they came up with their offers. So I got to talking to him about his P&Ls, tax returns for the last 3 years. And he just kept talking about net income, bottom line, and it was good bottom line.
That's good,
I
but
said,
not
well,
all.
what about depreciation? What about interest? Well, what's that matter? Well, you got to, we recast those into our valuation. And he owned the real estate. I said, are you paying yourself rent? No, I'm not paying myself rent. Well, are you selling the buildings with the build? No, I'm not doing that. So I'm going to charge them rent.
Factor that.
So are you doing that recast
negative,
on that? All these things he didn't even know about, yet this number to him was okay. And maybe that was his magic number. We didn't get that into depth to talk about, where he got that number from. But the fact is, he didn't understand where they came up with their value. He didn't even know what his value was. I couldn't even tell him. Didn't see any financials. My concern for that guy is he's going to get into a deal, even if it's a number he's okay with. And maybe it goes great. I pray that it does. I hope every business owner gets exactly what they want. But the trouble is when they retrades and the renegotiations start happening later down the line in due diligence, he's not going to know why. He's not going to have any footing to stand on to back up what he thinks the value of the company is. He's just going to have to accept that, hey, they're no longer willing to pay 6.5. Now they're down to 5.5 because they said so. They said they did some Q of E thing that I don't understand. I didn't run it by anybody, so I either can do this deal or I can walk away. And I just wasted, a huge amount of time and energy. And it's not even about the time. It's not like just time goes by. How much energy and paperwork and documentation Yeah, you are getting a second job when you enter a deal. If you don't have a broker or you don't have somebody that's doing that for you, you don't have a CFO who's going to handle all that. Yeah, you are absolutely getting a second job. My sellers who they're so afraid of anybody finding out they're doing a deal and they're going to handle it themselves, which I advise against. I always want them to bring somebody in that can help, but they are overwhelmed 2 and 3 months into a deal. They're just like, "Oh God, one more document? Hey, that's the way this thing works, man. Can we call your bookkeeper in now? Can we get her to sign an NDA? Get her get her on board with this so we can involve her and she can handle some of this load for you? Because I know this is not what you want to be doing, but this is the process." So, anyway, I think I got off topic there, but
No,
yeah,
but
I
you
worry.
kind
I
of
worry about business owners when these unsolicited offers come through and they don't even understand their own numbers.
you're exactly correct. And what they forget too is the hidden cost of doing this. If you enter into somebody who's not knowing what they're doing, who isn't serious or is foolish or take advantage of you, you're going to be paying your CPA and attorneys early on to handle a lot of this information that we do really pro bono to some degree. We get paid at close. So a lot of that headache you mentioned, we filter, handle, and prep and secure to help you get past that finish line and help you stay energetic, stay involved. And let's be honest, some unsolicited offers do bring good value. They bring some market validation to some degree, right? Valuation benchmarking. I think the biggest one is an exit readiness check. Do you know how to exit the business? Are you ready to exit? And do you have a plan? Because so often most owners don't have that plan when this unsolicited person reaches out. And now you're in the hyperdrive trying to do all these different roles, run the company. Second job, help be the deal maker. Third job, be the exit planner. There are a bunch of different things in place that you need to be ready for, especially if you have family members and other key friends that work with you. There's a lot. One thing it can do too, if it's a legitimate offer, it can give you leverage for a future sale. Now, I will caution this language here. Just a disclaimer. Just because you could offer something doesn't mean it was fully real. We can have that discussion another day for another podcast topic on how crazy that is. But it is good to have a ballpark. Set some idea. Don't take it at full knowledge. I would only say if the deal fell apart the day of close for something unforeseen, then you could say it was a legitimate offer. But just because someone told you something they might give you something is not an offer. Just because they wrote it in an LOI and didn't proceed further isn't legitimate, especially if it couldn't get done. So it is good to have some leverage here and some understanding. And also, too, like all things in life, you never stop learning. You never stop growing. My dad always told me, every businessman knows the day you get in, there's a day you're going to have to exit. And sometimes this is the wake-up call to know the exit may be coming or to consider it. And now, like you said, get that exit readiness checkbook, playbook in place so when the time is right, you can execute and you're not having as tough a job. I think too often we see that owners aren't ready. They get excited for an unsolicited offer. It's been on the back of their mind. They've been thinking about it, but they haven't done anything. And it accelerates these thoughts and emotions. That's where you can tend to stumble a little bit because you're now blinded by all these different factors and this pressure from all these different directions coming at you. You just got to be ready for that. And you never know when that day is going to come, like the heart attack you don't expect, or the car wreck, the fender bender you get into, or to fall and get stitches in your chin. It can happen tomorrow. It could happen in 3 years, 10 years from now. You just don't know. But start preparing. And for buyers, take our words at this. A lot of what we said is going to apply to your message being delivered. So you need to make sure your message is correct and you understand these different issues too, because they're going to affect your deal as much as it's going to affect the seller. Remember, you're in this deal marriage together. It's not one versus two. It's together moving towards the same direction to accomplish the same goal. And I think often deal-making people forget that. It's not one side versus the other. You're coming together in a marriage to make this work. If you treat it like that, it's going to be a lot better process. But you've got to be honest going into that relationship too. You got to be honest. Did we miss anything, Chris? I feel like we hit a lot of the great, summary points. We talked about getting every buyer, unsolicited buyers to prove who they are, get NDA signed, protect your process, validate. Did I miss any key takeaways we should be thinking about or anything we should add? Because those of you still listening, you got one hell of an education in the last 56 minutes, I can promise you. Golden information for the time, I promise.
I'll ask you one final question, Brandon.
I'm ready.
If an owner remembers, a seller, a business owner, remembers one thing from this episode, what should it be?
Get the NDA. There's probably more I could elaborate on, but at the simplest, most basic term is have an NDA. If you don't have that, you don't have legal recourse. And everything from the point of conversation that's anything other than, hi, what's your name? And I'm calling you. Do not get proprietary, basic, whatever. Have an NDA. Because if you
Even if
have
it's an
that, you set the groundwork.
Even if it's an acquaintance or a friend who's asking about your
Does
business.
not matter. I don't care if you've
Exactly.
done it for 30 years. And
Yeah.
we've seen owners take these people and give them pedigree when they're unsolicited,
Yeah.
and it still doesn't work out. We could talk about that another day, but have the NDA. If you have that, I really think you've got at least the basis started in the right direction. What about you, Chris? I'll turn it back around to you. What is the one thing you think, excluding the NDA, because I already got dibs on that you think a seller should have in the process?
I'm just going to go back to hit the pause button. Don't react when that unsolicited offer comes. Don't start sending them financials. Don't even have a thought.
Don't count the money. Don't count the money.
You almost need to create a business plan of how if you're not going to hire people, if you're not going to hire a broker, and you're not going to call your CPA and tell him to handle this or anything like that, if you're going to try and handle this on your own, you hit the pause button. You basically come up with a plan for how you're going to go through this process. And that's the other thing. Plan, pause, and process. Create that process of what this looks like. You are dictating the terms. Do not let that buyer dictate how this is going to go down because you think they're the ones that have the money. This still has to go in the way that it's supposed to go. Otherwise, it's going to go sideways fast.
You're not wrong. Like we said earlier, deals without structure wander wherever. You're exactly correct. And that's nice. I like that. We're going to do that next time, folks. You have a little last-minute Q&A at the end for all you who listen, for all the good stuff. That was good, Chris. I like that. Thank you. Well, I think we've covered it all. As always, we love your feedback. We love your information. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got questions, concerns, comments, we'd love to highlight that on the podcast. You can find us, obviously, on Spotify and YouTube and LinkedIn. I am Brandon Bourgeois. That is Chris Sater. We will see you next time on the Steps to Soul podcast. Thank you for tuning in.